Welcome to Daredevil in the Details, a show that explores and dotes on the philosophy and themes of Netflix's Daredevil, a digression collection brought to you by A Method to the Madness and ZeroIndent. I'm author DC McNeil, and I'm joined, as always, by Patrick from A Method to the Madness. Patrick,
Hello.
how we doing?
We're doing good. My microphone this week is right up in my giblets, so the production quality is off the charts this week. So my voice is going to sound extra crisp.
Extra crisp? I've got a new microphone. Okay, we're just living our best lives out here. Production. It has taken us. I have noticed that there's not been a string of more than 2 episodes where something about our production setup hasn't changed.
Yeah.
The first ones, it was like our lighting kept fluctuating week to week, and then we got the background, and then you were out of town, and then you didn't have a mic. It's just been a real roller coaster, you know?
It has, now that you mention it.
Yeah. Egg on our face, I guess, for assuming that our lives would conform to this show's requirements. But hey, here we are. Episode 8, Pat, of our show, which is incredible. Very, very excited about this one. We are talking, of course, this week, episodes 16 and 17 of Daredevil, which is season 2, episode 3, and season 2, episode 4. Before we get into the summaries and dig in, I mean, I think we both agree. We agreed last week, looking forward to this, but I mean, wow. These 2 episodes are something else.
Yeah. I remember back even before we were in the pre-production of this show, and I remember thinking like, man, I can't wait till we get to these 2 episodes specifically. And like now we're here. Like it seemed like I blinked and we're here.
Yeah.
It actually happened quite fast. But yeah, I'm so excited. So excited to talk about these episodes.
I have so much to. It's a funny one. I mean, I've been reading I've been reading a lot of Gene Wolfe lately, Book of the Earth Son, and one of the things that Gene Wolfe does specifically as like a speculative fiction writer is he has this specialty in every scene he writes is doing a lot of multi-purpose storytelling, but there's never one thing that is dominant over the others. It's not like other stories where you watch a scene and you go, oh, the scene is about this, and then here is the subtext stuff that's happening. And I feel that I feel like these 2 episodes are very similar in that there are, for a lot of these scenes, and particularly the stuff with Frank and Matt, obviously, there are a lot of things happening, but there's never one dominant thing that's happening where you can point to that and be like, oh, obviously the scene is about this. I think these are really like multi-layered, but there's no kind of like dominant layer where you can be like, oh yeah. And so for that reason, like rewatching it now, because I haven't rewatched this in ages, every scene I was like, oh well, that's kind of, you know, Matt's thinking about this, and then Frank is talking about this, but he's thinking about this, and then the show is thinking about these things. It's really really cool.
That's the kind of thing that's the kind of like magic that Alan Moore talks about, the storytelling wizardry, when you can't quite in the moment you can't pass out what the elements of why something is so compelling and interesting, but it is, you feel it like in your bones, like this is some good fucking storytelling.
It's visceral. It's like it's visceral, and it's you can't one of my problems with these episodes is like I had to take notes as I went, and I kept not wanting to pause it because I was it's like I need to keep going. It's a funny process.
I was watching some scenes and I was like holding the notes in my head, but I was like, man, I have to engage in the scene on an emotional level, you know, but also I have some shit that I need to write down.
Especially with how much is going on. If you get distracted for a second, you're gonna miss so much. It's goddamn. Okay, let's just get into it. Let's get stuck in. Episode 16, which is New York's Finest. This was written by Mark Verheiden and directed by Mark Jobst. I don't know how to pronounce Jobst, but we'll assume that's close enough. Could you please read the summary, Pat?
Daredevil is chained to a pillar on a silent roof in the summer evening. He and the Punisher, a man we learn is called Frank Castle, debate their morality. Frank insists that Daredevil is a half measure. Daredevil insists that Frank doesn't have the right to execute people, only the law and God have the right to judge. Frank captures Grotto and pressures Matt to kill him. Matt refuses, and in the scuffle, Frank springs his trap, attracting a bar full of angry bikers to the rooftop. Matt fights his way out of the building, saving Frank. The two part ways on uncertain terms.
That summary is very simple because it is one of these episodes or one of these pieces of storytelling where it's less about what happens and it's about how it happens.
Yeah.
There is we'll get to it as we work through the episode, but this entire time as Matt is chained up, Frank is going about and doing all these little things in the background. And the whole time I'm like, what the hell is he up to? Like, what is he doing? And then when it all kind of springs out, you go, oh, damn. Like, it is, man, this sequence rules.
Yeah. Yeah, it is funny. Yeah, he is constantly like doing the things, like just like doing little chores that he's setting up for later on.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, it's funny you mention it. I've never really taken notice of it actually. Like every time I watched it, I've just been so enamored by their dialogue. But you're right. It is cool that he's just doing stuff in the background.
When he's preparing this trap, and Matt is so focused on the conversation they're having that he just isn't like he doesn't seem to be putting anything together because he's so worried about being like he's just not. It's a very uncharacteristic moment I think for Matt because he just isn't fully aware of everything that's happening. He's very hyper focused on what's in front of him. But look, we'll get there. Okay. Well, let's follow the process. Okay, so we kind of start with Karen. Before that, we do get a little flashback / dream sequency little thing with Matt in as a kid, with presumably his mother. We're not sure of that yet. Obviously, having his eyes, it seems like treated, or she's sort of washing them, and then the cloth kind of runs red with blood, and then that's the contrast cut to Matt on the rooftop, and it sort of descends. We follow the blood, and then it's sort of the camera tilt swings downwards, and that downwards momentum converts into horizontal, and then we kind of wake up with Matt against the pillar. It's a very very cool, just visual piece of storytelling.
Yeah. And that camera movement at first, it looks like he's lying down, but then it kind of swaps and he's sitting upright.
Yeah.
It's strange and interesting. For sure. I noticed that as well.
It's very evocative. I don't know what it's trying to evoke, and that's some of what is really cool about something that we talked a little bit about, which we haven't really like fully elaborated on. I don't think in this show. But something that Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad love to do is open an episode hyper focused on a specific object or like sequence of process, and then it's not until the episode goes on. Sometimes it's immediately like you go, oh, okay, this is what it's about, but it's usually not until either halfway through the episode or sometimes like 3 episodes later where you realize why that thing is relevant and what it's doing. With
Vince loves that shit, Like
he's obsessed with it.
He also loves like fucking with you, because a lot of the time those objects aren't MacGuffins or anything like really particularly important. It's more like a very very symbolical object that it isn't used for anything in the plot. It's like it's the kind of thing that when you're lying in bed, you're thinking about like, why was there such a focus on that? And then it kind of makes you think about holistically the episode as a whole.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you're right. He's not showing you it's not a Chekhov's gun scenario where he's like, look, this will be relevant later. It's no, like this is all relevant. This is all thematically, contextually relevant. The difference between what's actually happening in the story and what the story's about is nil. Right, like they are melded into each other, and that's why I think this is here. I think it's trying to evoke some of Matt's past. It's trying to also show us like this is a dude, or this is what it put to mind for me at least. This is a guy who, not since he was a kid, has ever really felt like he's powerless to act, even if he's hiding the fact that he could do big time kung fu's and big time flips. Right, this is a guy who like fundamentally is always the smartest and the strongest person in most rooms, and hasn't really been in this. We haven't seen him be captured like this previously.
No, the only thing he can do, the thing he resorts to, is moralizing, which is hilarious. And 'cause he tries to get out. He tries to do the thing that always gets him out of situations, which is physical,
Yep.
violence and domination. And then he can't do it, and he's like, "Well, fuck, I gotta moralize. I gotta talk at him."
Well, what I like is he initially starts by, he doesn't start by moralizing. Okay, hang on. Let's get there. So, yeah, he's chained to the rooftop. And the initial conversation they have is, Frank has this just absolutely perler of a line where he's like, by the way, John Bernthal's performance, like, what the fuck? Like, holy shit! This has to be a career highlight. Like, this might be the best thing he's ever done. There's
I think so.
There's this understated. I've been thinking a lot about Andor. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm always thinking about Andor. I'm never not going to be thinking about Andor.
Really
yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
You never said that before. Yeah.
No, I know it's weird. It never comes up.
Yeah.
But there's a conversation that I really like where Bill Skarsgård, he's on set and he's doing his big speech. They're doing the takes for his big speech where he's what have I sacrificed? That's the speech. And there's about 30 seconds between each take because of where they are. They have to shoot and they just have to kind of like keep going until they get it right. And Tony Gilroy he's in an interview and someone sort of says, what was it like working with Skarsgård, like this legendary character actor? And he goes, it's really intimidating because when you give directorial advice, you're usually trying to help them find the vision of the scene, help them understand the scene. This guy knows more about acting. He's like, this guy knows more about acting than I ever will in my entire life. So giving him advice is really hard. But he says, we're shooting these scenes and there's something about it that isn't working. He's like, it just isn't there. And he says, look, between takes, he comes over and I realize as he's walking over that I have 30 seconds to give a legendary actor advice to try and make this scene work on the one day we have this location. It better be good. And Skarsgård comes over. Gilroy says, look, it's not quite there. And Skarsgård goes, no, I can feel that. I can feel that. There's something wrong. And Gilroy says, it's because it feels like you're giving a speech. And Skarsgård goes, got it. And he walks in and he does the take that they use in the final edit. And there's a quality to the performance of Luthen in Andor where even though he does have these big gestural, ideological, conversations and these big monologues, they feel like a person talking to a person. They don't feel like a character doing a speech. And there are I don't want to. I'll talk about it a little bit next episode. But Foggy sometimes feels like he's doing speeches instead of having conversations.
Yeah.
But John Bernthal, everything he says is like it's pitch perfect acting. It feels so naturalized, and the way that the little ticks he does, where he's sort of like he's never trying to be clear and understood. He's just saying what he's thinking.
Yes. Yeah.
It's the performance is just stunning.
That is a brilliant observation. Yeah, you're right. That's why among other reasons, I suppose that's why John Bernthal was playing Punisher and not the actor for Foggy. No offense to
among other things.
Yeah, among other things. No
there are
offense
other
to
reasons, I assume.
that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, Frank says, they say you don't hear the bullet that gets you. Always sounded like bullshit to me. As Frank is very casually sewing up his own wounds during this conversation, which is so hard. Like this guy's the toughest guy on the planet.
Yes.
It's very good. Yeah, that's kind of the opening gambit. Frank's basically like, stop shrinking me. Like, why are you trying to be a psychologist right now? But Frank is basically like, stop running the game on me and fucking talk to me. That's kind of their opening position. Matt is trying to manipulate him. Where are you from? You served, blah, 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 blah. And Frank's like, stop running the game and fucking talk to me, dude.
Which is why I think it's interesting to think about, like, why the Punisher, like, chained him up so he could talk to him. Like, he didn't gag him or anything. And then even though he seems, like, really annoyed at Matt for trying to psychoanalyze him, as he says, like, stop digging, Red. But, it's obviously, it's an excellent setup for juicy storytelling. That's why they did it. But it's fun to think about, like, a character motivation as to why that was. Maybe he wants to have a battle a battle of ideology, because I don't know what if you're in a morally precarious position like Frank Castle, you would want to sort of talk to someone about it, to
talk to someone who gets it. Who understands at least part of it. You've got to imagine this is one of the few conversations Frank has had since his family died. And I mean literally. Like actually not like transactions where he's going to buy weapons or he's trying to do this. This is probably like one of the first conversations he's had since his family died, and it's with someone that he thinks is going to understand the edges and the shape of it. He's despite everything, he still has that need.
Yes.
It's a really interesting, and then the fact that while he's done this, he is also setting up these two kind of morality puzzles for Matt. These two questions for Matt of like, it's a really he's like testing him in some way, or
yeah.
Well,
well, actually, the fact that he has put on a whole performance of like taking Grotto out later in the episode and stuff like that. It's like he really, it was a really like deliberate sort of need and want from Frank of talking to Matt, of talking to Daredevil, testing this guy, trying to best him in ideological wits.
Yeah. And also I think proving to Matt like why he's proving like why he has to do it.
Yeah.
It's a big part of what they end up talking about.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of Bane from The Dark Knight Rises.
Yeah.
It's not enough to break the Batman, you got to break his spirit. You got to prove his ideology wrong. Yeah, and
I think it's these larger than life kind of figures. Karen talks in the previous episode. She sort of analogizes these people as like sort of kind of like they're like lives of the saints, right? Like these are large figures who end up bloody and alone because of the tremendous pursuits they try and achieve. And this is these two characters with very different priorities in this moment and different desired outcomes in this moment, trying to outmaneuver each other. And like candidly, Matt just doesn't have it here. I don't think. We'll talk about it when we kind of once we get through some of this opening stuff. But I just don't think Matt has it in this conversation. I think that like I think Frank is probably like Frank outmaneuvers him. Is my kind of hot take.
I would disagree on that.
Well, we can argue about it when we get in. We'll get into the nitty gritty. I want to do some other little table setting stuff that happens in this episode. Or maybe the way to phrase it is, I think Frank gets him at one point and is right, and then completely like drops the bag, like just doesn't realize how precarious that position is. And that's the second that Grotto gets involved.
Why am I here?
Everything you do out there in the streets, Red, it doesn't work. Did you know that?
Oh, and what you're doing is better?
What I do, I just do. It's out of necessity.
Come on. You know you're not the only one, right? Who did you lose? Huh? Was it someone you loved? Well, boo-hoo. Let me tell you something, buddy. Everybody's lost someone. Doesn't mean you have to do this.
The loss doesn't work the same for everybody,
Yeah,
Red.
that's right. It's clearly not working for you.
Well, maybe not. We don't get to pick the things that fix us, Red. Make us whole. Make us feel purpose. My moment of clarity came from the strangest of places.
I don't do this to hurt people.
Yeah, so what is that, just a job perk?
I don't kill anyone.
Is that why you think you're better than me?
No.
Is that why you think you're a big hero?
It doesn't matter what I think or what I am. People don't have to die.
Come on, Red, you believe that?
I believe it's not my call, and it ain't yours either.
Somebody asked you to put on that costume, or you take it upon yourself? You know what I think of you, hero? You know you're one bad day away from being me.
Karen and Foggy are still at the kind of in the aftermath of the Punisher and Daredevil's disappearance. Karen really pushes things with Reyes, as always, just cannot help herself. And Foggy's like, dude, like, there's no amount of legal gymnastics that would have helped us here. Like, she's the goddamn DA. To which Karen's mental response is, legal gymnastics, you say. Let me go and find out how to do some of those, which is what you end up doing at the end of this episode. But yeah, so let's try and identify for these two guys the positions that they occupy kind of in this conversation. So while they're doing this, while they're having this argument, we do have a B plot with Nelson in the ICU talking to Claire, trying to track down Matt. He has his own little subplot going on. And I mean, let's talk about that first, because then we can just really dig into the conversation that Frank and Matt have. So, what do you? Okay, I don't know. I really think that, like, basically the setup is they're in the ICU. There's all these gang members coming in who are injured, and these two dudes clearly who are from different gangs, or there's some tension between them. They both end up with, like, you know, sharp instruments in their hands, and they're going to do a knife fight in front of a security guard in the ICU. It is the setup. And
yeah,
Nelson does a big time speech about priors and prison and going to prison for assault, and then they back down. And I think the idea behind this is good. To me, this speech is bad.
Wait, what's the idea behind it? Like, how does it fit with the rest of the episode, like, thematically?
So, if you think about the ways in which Foggy represents the opposition to Daredevil existing at all, he's like, I don't think that Matt should be doing this. He might be doing good things, but, like, this isn't the way to get things done. The two dudes with the scalpels in some ways represent, you know, or in some ways are analogous to Frank and Matt, right? Like, in a very loose kind of fitting way, you know, they want to hurt each other, and they're in the middle of a place where it's going to have collateral damage, and it's going to break bad for each of them forever. It's going to be, like, long-term consequences, potentially damning them for the rest of their lives. I think there's a maneuver that's trying to happen here. I just don't think it comes together, to be honest. I think it just ends up feeling like they give Nelson another moment to be a big, tough guy.
Yeah.
That's kind of what it ends up coming across as.
Right. Yeah, okay. That's pretty tenuous to me. Like,
that's what I'm saying.
The thematic connection, yeah.
That's the best I can do.
No, I think you're probably, like, on the money there. But I agree. I think, to me, that scene felt like they just wanted to make sure that Foggy wasn't left out of the Cool Kids Club, and he's important too.
Yeah. Which you can just hey, put him on the bench for this episode. It's fine.
Yeah, it's fine.
Someone has to warm the bench, guys. It's not a problem. He does have remarkably little to do this season that matters. He just ends up going off on these little side quests.
Well, at least in this initial arc, he becomes much more active in the following arcs.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess that's because these 4 episodes are about Karen, Matt, and Frank.
Yeah,
in a big time way. Okay, so talk to me, Pat. Talk to me about the the moral positions that Frank and Matt decide to occupy or are arguing for. So what do each of these dudes seemingly believe, or rather than seemingly believe, what do they argue? What version of morality are they both arguing the other in favor of?
Well, it all comes down to killing, to taking a life. It shows very, very enthusiastic about exploring I don't know, just like the religious concept of like a soul, and just how important that is. In the next episode, Father Lantern gives this beautiful eulogy about how a world has been lost when someone dies. And they're both kind of, you know, in terms of morality, they're both utilitarian in a sense. Frank is more like the commonly known utilitarianism of, yeah, man, you kill a few people, make the rest of the world a better place. Whereas Matt is like, you know, you beat up a few people and you make the rest of the world a better place. But that line of actually snuffing out a life is the big blurry line that separates them. And there's a surprising amount of juicy conflict that comes with that, and that's why their conversation sort of takes a religious turn midway through it. well, actually, Matt brings it up a few times. You know, he goes, "It's not for you and me to just make that decision. It's up to God." Which is actually, that's probably why you think that Matt is more or less in the losing side of this ideological debate. Yeah.
Yeah, because he makes the mistake, I think, of Frank's point. The reason Frank is doing this is because he basically says, like, you know, soldiers, we don't wear masks, we don't have that privilege, and we don't get to pick the things that fix us, that make us whole, right? That make us feel purpose. And he has this great line where this is why I think that Matt's maneuver for the religious aspect, and even, you know, he argues the law at one point. That I think those are mistakes, because Frank says, "My moment of clarity came from the strangest of places." And when Matt asks him, you know, were you Catholic or whatever? He's like, "Yeah, at one time." He's like, you know, "Did you go to this church?" He's like, "At one time." This is a man who, like, because of what's happened to him, is incapable of imagining that there is any other version of morality than the one that he is capable of enacting. Like, he is incapable of imagining that there is a divine judgment, because he's gone to Afghanistan. He's watched his friends die without feeling anything. He's killed people without feeling anything. He's come back, and the second he feels something, finally, for his family, it gets taken away from him. And so he's incapable of imagining that there is a God that would view his life and the things that have happened to him and deem that to be good judgment. It is like incalculable for him as a person. And Matt is still in this, like, you know, I mean, Stick points this out in season 1, but, like, Matt still has this sort of the strand within him of hope, and this belief of, like, redemption, that is necessarily ignorant. I think, like it's, like, deliberately ignorant, and that's what makes it a brave thing to carry, right? Like, he has to choose to be naive in this way, because if he doesn't, he will become Frank. But he doesn't know that. Like, that's the thing. Like Frank knows that. Frank's like, "Yeah, you, like, don't give me that shit about hope, dude. Like, what are you talking about? Like, fucking grow up." You know, what does he say? He goes, Matt says, "Let's talk about hope."
Santa Claus.
Yeah, you want to talk about Santa Claus? Fuck, man, Frank is funny. Frank is a funny guy.
He is.
I think you're wrong.
Which part?
All of it. I think there's no good in the filth that I put down. That's what I think.
And how do you know?
I just know. Look around, Red. This city, it stinks. It's a sewer. It stinks and it smells like shit, and I can't get the stink out of my nose. I think that this world, it needs men that are willing to make the hard call. That's what I think. I think you and me are the same. We're the same. You know it. Only I do the one thing that you can't. You hit them and they get back up. I hit them and they stay down. It's permanent. I make sure that they don't make it out on the street again. I take pride in that.
Let me ask you this.
What's that?
What about hope?
Oh, fuck.
Come on, Frank.
About Santa Claus? You want to talk about Santa Claus?
I live in the real world, too, and I've seen it.
What have you seen?
Redemption, Frank. It's real. And it's possible. The people you murdered deserve another chance.
What, to kill again, rape again? Is that what
No,
you
Frank,
want?
to try again, Frank. To try. And if you don't get that, there's something broken in you can't fix. And you really are a nut job.
Frank, you see?
You're unhinged, Frank. You are. You think God made you a one-man firing squad. But you're wrong. There is goodness in people, even in you. And you're gonna have to kill me, because I'm never gonna stop coming for you until I take you down. You wanna know why?
Why is that?
Because you're insane.
But he's right. He's like, "You want to talk about fucking Santa Claus right now? I thought we were having a real conversation." Like, that's the implication.
That's interesting. I didn't consider, because that line stuck out to me as well. My moment of clarity came from the strangest of places. I was actually wondering what he was referring to, and you know, that does fit. If you obviously, you know, if you experience something as tragic as your whole family being slaughtered in front of you, then yeah, you know, you probably would become pretty disillusioned with your faith. And so that would give him sort of like agency or like moral license to do whatever, essentially, just to be outside the bounds of morality and take revenge in whatever means necessary.
Yeah, which Matt calls that out too. He's like, everything you're doing is a guy doing revenge.
Yeah.
Like, he's like, you're not doing this for the right reasons.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder if there is another. I don't know. I would like to hear another reading of that though. Of that line, "My moment of clarity came from the strangest of places," because to me, like, that seems like a much more. I don't know. I imagine something much bigger, much more metaphysical to that line. I mean, that's it's a pretty significant event if watching your family get killed and then dropping your faith. But yeah, I don't know. It's
Well, I guess I don't mean to imply necessarily that when his family died, he went like that's when he lost his faith. It may have been years ago. I don't know that.
Yeah.
I want to be clear. Like, I don't want to conflate what he's saying, because when he's talking about his moment of clarity, he's talking about the clarity of his purpose, right? Doing the picking up the gun, the clarity to find the thing that fixes him and makes him whole after the death of his family. I don't know that we're supposed to conflate that with this faith thing. I think the faith thing is sort of when Matt asks him about that because he's trying to find avenues in. And I think the way that I took that, at least with in regards to the religious thing, it's like this dude walked away from the church a long time ago, like a long time ago, to the point where like it's not even worth talking about for him. And then we later understand that he's kind of been sleepwalking through a lot of his life until he comes back from Afghanistan. And when he talks about this moment of clarity, I think he's then talking about now that once his family died, what was next? And that moment of clarity was becoming a big time paramilitary murderer guy.
Yeah. See, I like that ambiguity of that line. Especially, and then after that he says, we don't get to pick the things that make us whole. Like, again, what is that referring to? Like, is it his family, and because he lost his family, he is, he's no longer whole? Or is it taking revenge on the people that killed his family? That's what makes him whole, and that he found purpose in that, and that's why he has such a conviction about doing what he does. It's, I don't know, it's just like this really every line in this episode is like so poetic, I feel. Yeah.
But it's understated. I think that a lot of that, like we were saying, that comes back to Bernthal's performance in a lot of ways. There's a way in which he will say something, and you go, "Oh, he means this," and you go, "Wait, no, hold on." But wait, hang on. And then, like, the more he talks, you're like, "Oh, but maybe was he talking? Maybe was this referring to that?" And you can start to feel what it's like for someone on the other side of this conversation, in the same way that we are on the other side of the conversation of the show in the first season, that's showing us what are those moments of clarity for Matt that bring him to the place where he puts on the mask and goes out and does this stuff. The moment of clarity for Matt that he talks about in season 1 is the first time there's this dude beating his wife, and the law can do nothing to stop him, and he goes out and he does this. Matt doesn't say that to any. He never says to Foggy, "Hey, this is precisely why this was the exact moment." He talks about it more as like in the same way that Frank is talking about this to Matt, where it's kind of like they're not performing speeches to each other about their ideology. They are explaining the way they feel about the situation they're in.
Yeah.
And that's where that room of ambiguity is.
Yeah, because it's just, I don't know, it's like sort of explaining something to a therapist. It's just like, well, where do you fucking start? Well, you have to be a bit poetic, because you can pack more of reality into something into something poetic, because otherwise you'd have to sort of explain every grain of sand about your life, metaphorically, and so just explaining how you feel in the present the best you can is I don't know, it's accurate but also like ambiguous at the same time.
Yeah, it's revealing and vulnerable in a particular sort of way, where the things that you are subconsciously prioritizing when you try to do that will tell you a lot about that character and the kind of the movements that are going on within them.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, because like it's poetry is all about like inferring stuff, right? Like it's yeah.
Yeah, and that's why I think that Matt is fundamentally like just positioned here to not come out of this the way that he's hoping to, because he is so Matt has this like mythopoetic streak within him. Like we talked about this in the first season. Like his Catholicism necessarily like kind of can put him in this position where he comes across as quite lofty and idealistic and sort of like he's like lobbying ideology, and Frank is talking about life.
Yeah, he's talking about shit you ain't been in.
Oh my god, there's a what does he say? Matt says, war changes people. Sometimes they see things they can't unsee. Come home to find homes that aren't there anymore. And Frank's like, what the fuck do you know about it? You don't. He's like, have you been to war? Yeah, you haven't. So don't be fucking talking about it to me right now. It's such a Frank understands something like Frank has a fundamental understanding of a part of reality that Matt does not have access to.
Mm-hmm.
He has done. This is a guy who, for the right reasons, putting that in inverted commas, for reasons society would justify, i.e., going to war, has done the thing Matt spent his entire first season wrestling over. This question of like, do I cross that line? And here's a guy who has realized for himself the line never existed. There never was a line. It was completely artificial. It's completely artificial. And there's a way in which like Matt is kind of powerless to argue against that, just in the face of the pragmatism of Frank Castle. It's really a cool, a very cool and quite it's a sort of the scene where every time I watch it, I kind of take something different from this episode, from these conversations they're having. I want to ask you something because I don't know the answer to this. I'm not clear on Frank's gambit with Grotto. Like, I don't understand, like, what Frank is trying to achieve here by bringing him in.
If he can get Matt to pull the trigger and kill Frank in order to save Grotto, it'll prove something to Frank. Now, what is that something? Like, is it connected to the reason why Frank wants to have a conversation with him in the first place? Like, is Frank battling an inner battle of morality secretly? He certainly doesn't show it. He certainly doesn't express it. But does he have something to prove to himself? And if he can get Matt to, I don't know. It's pretty dramatic, but if he can get Matt to kill him, then he'll die, and he will also die knowing that I don't know, that he necessarily wasn't like the same as the people he's killing. Maybe, I don't know, because it'll justify his utilitarian outlook on, well, I kill criminals to help people in the long run,
and maybe proving that like he says either way you're a killer, and I think his point there is like, either way you're a killer like me, we are the same, you just don't realize it yet. He even says that line, he says the Batman line where he's like, you just don't want to admit that you're one bad day away from being me. He even says that, and I think this is thinking about a lot of those same questions that we position within the kind of 70s, 80s, 90s stories that are involving Batman, and thinking about these questions and asking these questions in the wake of World War II and the Cold War, asking these questions about morality and violence and the merits of war. And I think positioning Frank as an Afghanistan veteran is a very specific sort of maneuver here. We even get there's a dude that comes to check out the rockets on the roof, this old guy in the building, and he's a Marine. And they have this little exchange where Frank is very warm to him when he realizes that he served. They have this little exchange, where did you serve? And then he even as the Marines, as the guy's walking away, he calls out Marine, Semper Fi, and the guy's like, yeah, fuck yeah. And then the second he closes the door, Frank's smile disappears. And it's unclear, was that a performance, or like what was happening there? Because it seems to me that Frank has no love or respect necessarily for the fact that he was in the armed forces. He's not like a. I don't think Frank Castle's a patriot. I don't think he has a streak of patriotism in him, but there is something about him. Like he can immediately switch into that. He code switches into that mode so easily, and then code switches back out of it into the what is his real self, which is this person in this moment with Matt. The thing he is doing is the authentic self, and that code switch is him moving into that kind of military mode, and it is interesting the ways in which we could think about who are the people that are capable of doing this work, that are capable of going through this training, leaving their families, invading a foreign country, and killing the people that live there. Who are the people that are capable of doing that work, and why is it that we valorize them in the ways we do, and for the things they do in the specific framework of patriotism? And then why are we surprised when they come back and they are behaving different types of ways and having different types of challenges that we are obviously inevitable with having done that work? But Frank doesn't seem to be one of those people. Frank doesn't languish over the fact that he killed people. He seems fine with it. So what does that mean for Frank, and what does that mean for Matt if he is one bad day away from being this guy? It's not just that he would kill one guy. It's that he would literally be Frank Castle. He would be the guy who never thinks about it again. It's that one. It's like the turnkey in his morality system.
I think it has something to do with how he talks about soldiers don't get the privilege of wearing masks. You go home and take off that mask, you think maybe it wasn't me. Well, that's not the case for soldiers, and therefore when he encounters that veteran on the rooftop, he has no apprehensions about just being himself. He gives his real name. I'm Frank, and he has like a moment of, it seems like, genuine connection with this guy, even though he's ready to blow his brains out if he does, investigate. And that's because he just doesn't care about like the moral repercussions that are assigned to him. Whereas like Matt is very concerned with that.
I think the other thing it's doing too is it's showing us like, it's if Matt is one of the if this conversation with Daredevil is the first real conversation he's had in since his family died, potentially, and we can almost infer, pretty much guaranteed it is. He is walking through the rest of his life, constantly putting on these little facades. They're authentic. They connect. They have a connection. Him and this veteran have a connection, but it's a facade. It's a niceness for everyone else. It has nothing to do with him. He isn't doing that to make the guy's night better. He's doing that because he just has to. It's sort of it's a requirement here. And I think we saw that the previous episode, or whichever the episode was, where he went and he bought the police radio, or so he could listen in on the comms. And he didn't do any performance for that guy when he was doing that transaction. He was just said the least amount he had to and got the fuck out of there. Until he didn't, But so it's interesting to me that the fact that this guy is a Marine warrants some kind of performance to meet him on the level he's coming at. There is something happening there about the fact that he served. And this show will think about that for the rest of this season with Frank, and like what it means for him to have been in the military and to have been wounded in the way that he was, and what it means to be in control of the actions that you're doing, and what it means to like take accountability for those. And like you said, like Frank doesn't care about the moral jeopardy for himself. He is a character who cannot face a damnation of his own making because he doesn't believe in the concept of being damned. When we talked in season 1 about like Matt and just his constant, like he's so far up his own asshole with this, like, oh, am I a good person, am I a bad person? Because he has that Catholic question of guilt and that Catholic question of like crossing this line. And so it's so impossible for Matt to imagine, the same way that it's impossible for Frank to imagine believing in God. It's like impossible for Matt to imagine just not facing the consequences of your own actions.
Yeah. Wait, I thought I had a note about this. Oh yeah, like it, because, I mean, why would you be so concerned with damnation? You know, from a religious perspective, it's because, you know, it's because of the threat of suffering, essentially. You know, like the concept of hell and stuff. Whereas like Frank, he's suffered. It's nothing compared to what he's already suffered. The suffering he's already endured. And so why would you care about damnation? You know.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. If there's a line where I don't know who says it, but someone, it might be Frank. I think it's when he's in with Finn or something like that, and he's been captured. But someone's like, someone says something about hell, and he's like, oh, like I know, I'm already there. You know, like Frank is a dude who feels very presciently the fact that his life is over, and he is now a vessel for this purpose.
Yeah.
You know, he's there's nothing left for him. And we'll talk about that in the next episode, and the way that ends. But I mean, so ultimately, the way that this conversation comes to a head is he drags in Grotto, and he forces Grotto to explain that the guy he killed, so he forces him to explain there was this guy he killed. He went out and did a hit, and when he was there, the dude's mom is in the building, sees his face, and he kills her too.
Mm-hmm.
And it is this absolutely just it's like a gut punch. Like, you've watched Karen and Foggy lobby for this guy, try and get him into WITSEC. You've watched Matt try and keep this guy alive from Frank. And then when Frank reveals the reason he's killing him, you go, Jesus, this guy is a scumbag.
And I love Matt's reaction too. He's just like, it's such a soul-crushing, like devastating defeat of his belief in extends to his belief in humanity, pretty much. Like, you know, it's his belief in Grotto is like a microcosm of his belief in redemption and humanity. And then when it's revealed that not only did he kill this guy, he killed an innocent woman, he's like, fuck, man, like, why?
It's
why
a guy
did you
he's
have to
swore
go
to
and do this
protect.
to me?
It's a guy he's swore to
Yeah,
protect. There's something quixotic about Matt's worldview. There's something very old-fashioned and kind of like knightly about his view of reality. And to just have Frank so effortlessly, just in an instant, wheel this guy out and prove something Matt knows, which is like his naivete is deliberate, and it's a weakness, you know, in some aspects, and its strength in others. And for Frank to so effortlessly put that on display and go, look, you shoot me or I shoot him. Either, like, you know, you got to make a choice here. Someone's got to die. You either punish the guy and you join you recruit yourself to my perspective, which you know is something you're one day away from being, or you shoot me and you prove me right. And it's such an effortless maneuver on Frank's behalf. And that reveal is Matt just starts yelling as this is happening. He's just an animalistic kind of like sound coming out of him as he's trying to escape. We should say too, Frank has taped a gun to his hand. We didn't say that. So, Frank...
It's like, you know when one of the boys passes out at the frat house, and you duct tape a mug to his hand.
Yeah,
it's like that, but with a gun.
It's like when you tape a 40 to your hand, you know, but it's a gun. And it's got one round in it. And he's like, you shoot me or you shoot Grotto. And Matt does the Matt Murdock, there is always a second door maneuver, where he shoots the chain at the last sec. Well, also what's happening as this is happening. So Matt shoots the chain and then manages to stop Frank. Frank shoots Grotto anyway. As this is happening, Matt stops him from just taking the headshot. Then as this is happening, Frank grabs out a rifle, blows up the bikies' bikes, and then turns on a big spotlight, which is the thing he was fucking with the whole, like, all the stuff he was doing in the background. He was breaking out the rifle and putting it together. He was stitching up his little wounds to get ready to escape. He was up there doing something with a wrench on the light, and you're like, what the fuck is he? What is he doing on that billboard? And then this all kind of plays off in this moment where he shoots the bikes, they explode, and then turns on the lights. So the bikies are gonna come up to this roof, and you know, he says to Matt something like, he says like, unless you grow wings, you're fucked, basically. Like, it's something like that. The only way you're getting out of here is if you grow wings. And then Matt knocks Frank unconscious and basically decides to save him. Can't leave him up here. Grotto's dying. Grotto's dead. Grotto's out. But Frank he can save. This guy who he set out to stop. This guy who the whole reason he's out and about is he was here to stop this guy from killing Grotto. And now that he has killed Grotto, he's going to save this dude. Mm-hmm. It's a very, delicious.
What a guy. And it's funny how, like, Matt is just, he has the most determination, like, I've ever seen, because he could have used Frank to help him fight the dogs of hell, but no, he has to beat Frank and also beat the dogs of hell. And he's like, yeah, man, let's do it.
Let's do it.
He does it. Yeah.
And he says, let's go sicko mode. And he gets the chain out and just, I mean, we'll talk about the fight scene in a second, but this Matt and Karen are doing the same thing in their respective areas in these episodes. Karen literally cannot help herself from being empathetic and trying to think the best of people and help them out. To the point where, like, she puts them in this position where Grotto is here on this rooftop with this thing that he's been keeping from them because she fundamentally cannot stop herself from believing in that people are righteous and fundamentally good and deserve redemption. And Matt is the same. Matt cannot give up. He is fundamentally incapable.
There's an interesting scene earlier when Karen receives a phone call from Grotto, and it's this really earnest conversation where Grotto is saying, like, you know, you fucked me over, like, all you lawyers with your fancy talk all the time, sticking it to guys like me, you know, all I wanted was a chance, like a second chance. And, you know, Karen's saying, like, you know, Grotto, you have to believe us, like, we didn't know this was going to happen, I'm sorry. And he says, you know, you can go to hell. And he hangs up. And I think it's just an interesting dimension to the feeling of when it's revealed that he's, you know, he murdered that old lady. It's another moral complication because he just sounded so earnest in that phone call. He was, I don't know, he says complicates things.
He says all you lawyers are alike, running your mouths with banshee talk so you can stick it to guys like me.
Yeah.
Grotto's such a weird guy. Who talks like that? He's very much a New York gangster. He's like, talks like this. He's from New York. You lawyers, you banshee talk. He's great. What a little goblin he turned out to be.
A rascal.
Yeah. I mean, okay. Then we get this big kind of hallway, staircase fight scene. This is like our big one-er for this part of the season. The previous season had obviously the big one-er in episode 2, and then one toward the end. And this is our kind of first one. We'll get one a little bit later as well. But I mean, this one-er is very cool. Matt,
I think this is my favorite one of the series. I think
so too for me. Yeah, it just has a sense of dynamism, and the setup is really cool. So Matt he's got Frank on his shoulder, and they're in like a cargo elevator, which I like the fact that this was clearly a building. Into my mind, this was clearly a building that was like a bunch of like warehouses or storage or something, and it's been converted into just the grossest looking apartments of all time. And he's about to go down this elevator to avoid the bikers, and then he sees a dude come out of his apartment, and Matt kind of was like, God damn it. And so he steps out of the freight lift, and the freight lift carries Frank down the building while Matt fights his way down. All because this one guy came out of his fucking apartment.
And it communicates that visually in like a second too. Like, the door's closing, the bikers are coming, the dude comes out. They don't hit him in that moment, but then you just see Matt's hand just reach out from under the screen, grab the door. Like, it's so cool.
And then he bluffs them with the gun that's still taped to his hand. What I love about this fight scene is he goes the entire fight with this gun taped to his fucking hand.
Yeah, and he's got a chain in the other.
And he's a chain. The chain is sick.
And he uses it to knock out the lights overhead. And it's to keep in mind this is all still happening in one take. And it's very convincing. I think that's what I like about this particular this particular sequence in the scope of Daredevil as a whole, because the other fights, as much as I love them, and you love the messiness aspect of it, how it's pretty imperfect in terms of like the choreography. The choreography in this scene, I think, is like the best as well, in the series. And that the chains hitting the lights are sold like just exceptionally well.
I like how often we aren't. Something I really like in this is the camera work, that we're often not centering on the action we would like to be seeing. We're centered on something that is available to us in that moment. Like, very often, instead of the punch being the center of the frame, it's like just to the side of the frame.
Yeah.
Or it's like you're seeing someone just get hit, but you don't really see them land, or you don't see the contact. Like, it's very the camera is orbiting through this building and through these staircases in only angles that are available to a physical camera in that space. And it has this effect of, like, it feels like you're following Matt through this space down these stairs. And of course, he beats up all the guys upstairs, and then we get this great character beat as he arrives at like the ground floor, where because he's knocked out all the lights upstairs, the electricity emergency lights have come on, and they're red, and he's bathed in this red light as he's coming down the stairs, and then the camera orbits, and he comes and he jumps and he punches a guy in the head, and then it's on again. And it's a really great character beat, where we suddenly get to see, like, in this instant, what it's like for these guys in this moment. The thing that they are facing down is a guy in this costume who just beat the shit out of like 30 of their dudes.
Yeah. I also, another like cool character expression through choreography is how he conserves his stamina right up until the moment where he needs to fight. So for example, there's guys coming from behind him, and he doesn't turn to face them until they swing, and then he ducks, and then he starts engaging them. And because you have to fight like 30 dudes, you have to be as optimal with your stamina as you possibly can, and that's cool. Like, it's
I like the moment before he gets to the ground floor where he finishes the last dude he's fighting, and he just sits there for a second, like panting. And of course, just as the fight starts, he pulls the trigger of the gun because he needs to grip it in order to use it to hit people.
Okay, yeah.
And he pulls the trigger and he grins, because I was always like, why does he pull the trigger there? And I was
like, he doesn't. He lets out a little laugh. He's like,
yeah, he laughs, and then he's like, let's go, and then he goes full sicko mode. But I like that.
He's a bit of a jokester.
He's having fun with it,
Yeah.
And I mean, we also get our new suit next episode, which we'll talk about, or I guess at least the helmet and the gloves. But it's also cool just to see. I mean, that big guy at the end that Matt fights, there's this really big dude at the end that he fights. It feels like a mini boss, and that guy beats the shit out of Matt pretty much. Like, Matt really clutches that at the end and manages to sort of stay alive. But I mean, that dude pastes him pretty good.
I mean, and did you get the sense that it was sort of like a bait and switch as well, because the camera focuses on Frank for a second, and you're like, oh, he's gonna get saved by Frank, but no, he just pulls through.
Yeah, Frank's just gone.
Yeah,
Frank just vanishes, and you get sort of Matt standing, his back to us, framed against the flaming, vehicles, the flaming bikes in front of the bar. It's a very cool, like, little, and they just hold on it, and you go, man, like, what is Matt thinking? What's running through his mind in this moment? We get to sit with that for a moment before the credits roll. This episode is just very good.
the scene before the credits roll is Karen looking at the X-ray of Frank's skull with the bullet,
about that.
and then the credits roll.
I forgot about that. Yeah. What do you make? Yeah, I mean, the whole time we are cutting back between this fight of Karen going through all the DA's documents. We should mention she blackmails the DA's
Blake Tower.
Yeah, Blake Tower for these documents about Frank. It's a cool little maneuver. This is the legal gymnastics that Foggy was insisting didn't exist that she manages to pull out of her ass. And this guy will come back. This will be a character we revisit this season.
Yeah.
He's a very interesting
and
dude.
he plays a prominent role next season as well.
Yes.
I like how they set this guy up. Like he's a recurring character, and he has very interesting motivations. He's kind of a bit like self-centered, and like he's a political schemer, it seems. And yeah, I like that they focus on or I like how even though this guy doesn't have like a major part early on, he's still like included. Like he's just sort of in the background, but he was always there, you know.
Yeah, you get the sense that all of these side characters are people with lives doing stuff that happens to intersect with our guys, you know? It's like the best kind of storytelling where it's like they have priorities that are different than the priorities of the story that we are being told. It just makes it feel more realized and realistic. And then does make it more interesting when they come back and they have something to do with the story.
Yes.
Yeah, he's an interesting dude. Okay, what... I guess we will be talking about this a lot this season because it is a big thing, particularly for like the next couple episodes. But what do you make of the X-ray and the way the reason that's the shot the episode ends on?
Well, I mean, one, it's the Punisher symbol. It's cool. It's comic-y. It also is a crucial piece of evidence in the coming trials. It's very relevant to the plot. And I don't know how to get into this without spoiling it. But
yeah, we like I said, we'll be talking about it a lot this season, so like we don't have to answer it now. I just thought it was notable. I don't know how I feel about this inclusion in the story because it's been a minute since I've revisited it. I don't know if I liked it or not. I can't remember. My instinct, my David instincts are like, I don't like it, but I don't know if that's going to be the case because I haven't revisited it in a long time. So I'm reserving judgment.
All right.
It's the kind of thing that if someone put in a story, I'd be like, do we need this? Are we doing this?
Well, as you probably forgot because this episode is like so good, but this is like a comic book show, it's not, Pat. How dare you? This is a religious epic morality drama that happens to have superheroes in it. But yeah, you're ultimately right. I sometimes forget that it's a superhero show. I do too.
Which is a testament to what it's doing.
I just think this episode is just the perfect orchestra of like ideological character conflict and poetic dialogue, and it's one of my favorites. So good.
You very well said. Go and watch this episode. I don't say this often, but if you're not watching along with us, go and watch this if you haven't seen it. This episode absolutely rules. Just for Bernthal's performance and his body language alone in those conversations. Yes. You need to hear the way that this guy... obviously, you will have heard it because I'll play clips throughout, but like you need to go and experience this, in my opinion. Absolutely brilliant storytelling. Okay, we're going to take a break, and then we will come back and talk about Season 2, Episode 4.
Daredevil review.
Okay, Penny and Dime, Season 2, Episode 4. This one is written by John C. Kelly and Peter Hoare. Patrick, could you please read us the summary?
Finn Cooley returns to the Irish mob and kills his number 2, staking his claim. It's time to find the Punisher and take our money back. Meanwhile, Karen blackmails the DA and heads to Frank Castle's home in the hopes of learning what drives a man to this life. Elsewhere, Frank is captured by the Irish mob and tortured. As Frank breaks out, Daredevil breaks in, and the two cut their way through the mob. After their escape, they sit in a graveyard, Seemingly for the first time since his family's death, Frank performs confession. He tells Matt of his daughter. Frank performs confession. He tells Matt of his daughter, of returning home and realizing his place in the universe, of his regret in turning her away the night before her death. Frank explains he's cashing out, and Mahoney takes the collar, agreeing to lie about Daredevil's presence to preserve the myth of the system. All is right in Hell's Kitchen, and Nelson and Murdock and Paige celebrate at Josie's. For a brief moment, Matt's life is perfect. He and Karen walk home in the rain and share a kiss. But peace is fleeting. Matt grabs a beer from the fridge and turns to find Electra Nacho sitting in his living room.
I'd forgotten that's how this episode ends.
Yeah, right.
So I'm like, oh man, Matt's having a really good week. He's in a really good place. And then the camera pans and he grabs it. And I'm like, oh god damn it! Like, it's such a good way to end the episode.
Yeah,
brilliant. You're not even allowed to sit and think that things are good. No, not for Matt Murdock.
Yeah, no. There's who hasn't had their ninja ex break into their house?
It's classic. It's
Yeah.
always happening to me. Especially after you finally make a move on that girl you like. It's a tale as old as time, Pat. This episode opens with the Irish having like a funeral drink for their fallen comrades. And Finn walks in and it's unclear what Finn's kind of position is, like in the hierarchy. But, he says like, I got on the first plane I could when I heard, and he sort of has a drink and he's like, my son is dead, and his lieutenant is like, oh, death is like a part of it. Death is like, that's part of the agreement. And Finn like pauses, grabs like what looks like a bottle opener or something, like
it's an ice pick.
An ice pick, and then just murders the guy in front of everybody. And he's like, you find my fucking money. Like get my fucking money. Like, what do you, like, let's stop fucking around. And if you get my goddamn money, or I'll fucking kill you too. And that's how it opens. It is crazy how quickly the energy turns in that scene.
Yeah.
It's really alarming, and it's a very well done piece of storytelling.
I like how he mediates the tension in the room as well. As he's stabbing this dude, he's like looking around like at his cronies, like, yeah, you're all good. Like, you don't mind me stabbing this dude? And
everyone's like, yeah, of course. Like, you're cool, man. You're good.
No,
hey, listen, you know what? You're the boss, so I guess. And then he like throws the dude out of his coffin. It's so good. It's such a like. It's we were talking a little bit about in the previous in episode 3 about this idea of like Frank kind of saying to Matt like, stop running the game on me and actually like be real with me here. Finn is doing the same thing. He's like, stop fucking running this little game and respect the dead dearly. Okay, we're at fucking war. Like, this isn't the time to sit on pomp and circumstance and ritual. This isn't the time to be squeamish about, respecting this, that. Like, get it done. We're in this position. We need to act on it. It's a very it's a very specific approach to this problem, where instead of trying to rally these people behind him and do a big speech or something like that, he basically puts them in a position where they are compelled to do this. He is compelling them to do this instead of trying to convince them to do this, which is a very different kind of leadership style or like way of doing this.
It's certainly a unique leadership style. I'll give him that.
Yeah, it's a strong motivation.
And for this is the people might have caught that this is the actor for Finn plays Van Gogh in one of the Doctor Who episodes.
Yes, I did notice that.
Yeah,
I was like, oh, it's that guy.
Yeah,
one of the very the few good episodes in Moffat's seasons. It's a good one.
Yeah, well, yeah. For the viewers at home, the last like few weeks, David and Mitchie have been having heated and in-depth discussions about Doctor Who in our group chat.
Pat's like, shut the fuck up.
Yeah,
I don't care about Doctor Who. Look, Doctor Who show one day, okay? We'll definitely do a Doctor Who show. It seems inevitable. The universe is there's an Assassin's Creed show that me and Pat are going to do, and then there's a Doctor Who show that me and Mitch are going to do, and that's the universe's true alignment.
That's just how it goes.
Yeah. Sometimes you just gotta answer the call to adventure, Pat. That's what you have to do.
Answer the call to podcasting.
Answer the call to podcasting. What I thought was interesting, I asked in the first episode, why is summer relevant? And it comes back here, where as they're searching for Frank, I don't know why my brain picked up on this detail, but as they're searching for Frank, one of the kind of mobster that's in charge of this search, he says to the pet shop owner, "I'm looking for a customer. Wears a jacket, even in the middle of summer." They say,
right?
And I was like, "Oh yeah, that is weird." But it's because obviously Frank's got the bulletproof vest on underneath at all times. It seems like. But
I think it's just because he's an emo boy.
He is a big time emo guy.
Yeah,
I would.
Very
You know
edgy.
what? I think if your family gets murdered in front of you by the Irish mob, you've probably earned the right to be a big time emo guy.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I shouldn't. We don't know that it was the Irish mob that killed them. It's implied, but when if we watch the Punisher for this show, which we may end up doing, it's not necessarily the Irish mob, is all I'm saying. That's just what's implied here. I don't think.
Right.
It's
I
the case.
think I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's actually them that did it, but that is certainly what this is implying. Or at the very least, that Finn has knowledge of the death of Frank's family, because
Yes.
we learn that later when Frank has pinned the Frank is luring them into a trap by pinning the concession tickets for the merry-go-round, which is the place in front of which his family was murdered.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where he goes to wait for them to lure them out. Yeah, it's good stuff. It's really it's just like all like unspoken little character maneuvers here with Finn. And it's also notable, I think, that he's in this for one episode and then he just gets fully murdered. Like, this guy is gone.
Yeah.
We talked in episode 1 about like that inversion of, we thought the other guy was the leader. He was going to be the big bad for the season.
Yeah.
And this is they do it again here where they're like, oh yes, here is Finn Cooley, truly the head of the Irish. Oh, he's dead. Okay.
He's a cool character though. He has a presence. For this episode he's in, and then his face gets removed.
With the shotgun.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
He gets very dead. What happens? I've written down here after this. This is a dot point. Once again, the Matt and Karen vibes are immediately intense the second they're in a room together, which is true. They come back from. They're going to Grotto's funeral, and Karen meets Matt at his apartment, and they just have. It was the kind of thing where I was like, "Do I need to leave the room? Like, am I intruding?" Like, this is a very personal moment. I'm not sure if I should be here for this.
I like how she mentions the brother, and Matt says, "Oh, I never knew you had a brother," and she goes, "Oh, you never asked." And it's interesting how it contrasts with like other people who knew she had a brother because they dug into her history, but not Matt. He's sincere. He's
yeah, he wants to know.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, we should talk about Grotto's funeral because, like you said, Lansing has a really good speech there. I think you said this at the end of last season about Fisk and this show's insistence on refusing to let any character stop being developed, even after Grotto's death. Father Lantham explains that Grotto would go to church every Sunday, and he would always donate hundreds of dollars, one time a Rolex, which is obviously like money from doing crime. It's crime money. Yeah. That's a Rolex from a dude who's probably killed or stolen from someone or something like that. And it's like, what an interesting characterization for this guy.
Yeah, he was so desperate for absolution, which that's a pretty compelling sort of quality for an evil character, more or less.
A character who cannot achieve it because what he has done is so evil and reprehensible. Like, his soul is damned, but he is desperate for a way back.
Mm-hmm.
He's sort of the we talk a lot in these spaces about like characters that have that get to do like an act of it. You have to, like, when it comes to redemption, right? you have like your active atonement where like you do a thing that in the eyes of the goodies absolves you of like what you've done. But characters like this, like they can't be absolved. Um, and you get that from Matt's reaction to like on the rooftop when he learns what Grotto did. This guy can't be brought back into the fold. He is too far gone. But interestingly, Frank isn't, because Frank has, as much as it's fucked up, Frank has his own set of morals around who he will kill and who he won't kill. Grotto seemingly does not, and therefore Frank is potentially capable of that act of atonement and some kind of path back, not to being good, but to being at least partially absolved for the things he's done. So there's a real difference between these two people. And then Lantern says, "We rush to say one life. We rush to say one life gone, but each of us is a world, and today a world has been lost." And on this topic, Matt's like, most priests would have found something nice to say about the guy. And then Father Lantern replies, "Funerals are for the living, and revising history only dilutes the lessons we should learn from it." And
God, I love Father Lantern.
I just went, damn. 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 Like, this guy he is dropping bars every time he's on screen.
He is ultimate, like, just wisdom incarnate.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
What do you take from this? I mean, obviously, Matt's like, he's seeking something at this moment from Lantern, and Lantern's like, "What do you want, Matthew? Like, I don't know how to help you here." And Matt doesn't know either. What do you take from this funeral? Like, obviously, it's thinking about that little characterization of Grotto was really interesting, like this kind of desperation for absolution. But what do you take away from this this little inflection point? Because this happens a lot in the show, where our guys will end up at a funeral, standing over the grave of someone that was involved with what they're doing, and they all sort of seemingly have different maneuvers in the story.
I don't know. Every time he speaks to Father Lantern, it's a therapy session, essentially.
Pretty much.
Yeah, it's like psychoanalyzing Matt. I love how Father Lantern sort of communicates to Matt, even when he's not actually saying like a fact. He's asking a question in this instance where he says, "It wasn't my fault," and then Father Lantern goes, "What isn't Grotto's death?" And he goes, "Well, I never said it was," and just like that very honest response of like, what are you talking about? Like, of course it wasn't fucking your fault, mate. Like, yeah, I think there's some deliberate like communication in that line of trying to get the point across to Matt that like you've taken like all this guilt upon yourself, but then he sees that it's not enough to put Matt's mind at ease, so he sort of, I don't know how I feel about this suggestion that like he tells Matt, he gives him like a call to action essentially. He goes, "Well, if you're feeling guilty, it means that your work isn't yet finished." And then Matt goes, "Oh, interesting. All right, thank you for the advice." And then he goes off, and it's like, that was a very like concrete thing to say to Matt. You know what I mean? Like,
I think it's a Catholic thing. I think it's a Catholic thing to say to Matt. So much of Catholicism is based on guilt. Like it's pulling on the structural, like the load-bearing structural apparatus of that religion. If you feel guilt, the work is not done. Accepting, of course, the fact that everyone feels guilt all the time. It's a trauma response. Like,
yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. And like he says with like a lot of certainty, it's like, well, yeah, obviously, well, it means you still got shit to do.
And I think that's where we talked last season about the fact that like Lantern is the kind of priest where if all priests were like this, everyone would go to church.
Mm-hmm.
But I think he fails Matt in this moment because of the religious aspect of their relationship and the thing that unifies them. I think this is like wrong. I think fundamentally Father Lantern is wrong here. The reason Matt feels guilt is because he protected a guy who did these things. he protected this guy, and he feels guilty because he let his naivete draw him in that direction and let him put his friends in positions of danger and put himself in a position of danger and allowed innocent people to be drawn on by Frank and by the situation that he put them in because of his naivete and because he protected this guy.
Right.
That's why
right.
he
Yeah.
feels guilt.
I think, yeah. Father Lantern, instead of inciting introspection, he incites go do this thing in the physical world. Like, it's your guilt can be fixed by external forces and not from
internal.
any introspection.
Yeah, exactly. And there's an aspect of like that comes back to the stuff they talked about last season around the devil and do you think the devil walks among us and things like that. It's the evil is both within us and without us, and if it's without us, go find it and punch it. And basically, I mean, Lantern's advice here is go punch it out, buddy. That's what he's saying.
Yeah.
Go do therapy with your fists. Don't think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Which in some ways is the most Catholic thing of all time. Go do works instead of thinking about it. It's a very Catholic thing. Yeah.
Go build a house.
Yeah. Go exsanguinate the guilt you feel by doing external things to make yourself feel better instead of doing instead of helping people for the right reasons and expecting nothing in return. There's a really good I wouldn't be able to put my hands on it. There's a really good essay I was reading in the pre-work for the Sherlock book about the ways in which like the mythologization of guilt particularly in Western religions, but they were specifically talking about Catholicism, is like there's this way in which like guilt and the threat of damnation, all those kinds of things are like fundamentally interlinked with the underpinning of the religion, which is like inherently a selfish exercise. To my mind, it seems morally wrong to do good things with just for the promise of getting into heaven. Like that to me seems morally wrong. And so one of the founding fundamental questions that this essay is talking about is that all it comes down to? And if we're doing something to help people for no reason, is that even actually possible? Because like you can't do things without purpose. Even if you're not doing it to make yourself feel better or feel good, you will feel good by helping somebody. And so they make this argument of like it is an inadequate counter argument to these types of religions, these doomsday cults, where the end is always the outcome. That's the thing you're concerned with. It is an ineffective counter argument that it's selfish to do good things if you're doing them just to get into heaven, because it doesn't matter how you spin it, doing good things for other people helps you and is like fundamentally a good thing, which I just think is like really interesting in this space when we're thinking about guilt with Father Lantern and the way he positions that for Matt as a motivator to go and do works instead of as a motivator to go to therapy.
What are you looking for?
Forgiveness?
For what?
Oh. Not doing more?
You just said you did everything you could. If you're the man I understand you to be, I'm sure that's true.
Then why do I still feel guilty?
Guilt can be a good thing. It's the soul's call to action. The indication that something is wrong. The only way to rid your heart of it is to correct your mistakes and keep going until amends are made. I don't know what you didn't do or what you should have done, but the guilt means your work is not yet finished.
Thank you.
All right, so Matt goes and gets his new helmet, and like a set of steak knives, Potter throws in some new gloves as well.
Yep.
He says if you buy the helmet right now, you get a free set of gloves. And okay, I have a question for you because I know you really like a lot of the design in this show. What do you think about the new helmet?
Honestly, I didn't really notice what was changed about it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not very good at picking up on stuff like that, honestly.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine. Look, it's a very different facade and shape. So like the one that Matt has at the start of the season is quite thick and bulky around the cheeks and has a flat panel on the front, which Potter has replaced with a black kind of graphite. He's repaired it. The new one is like a red cowl over the top, and then like kind of very slender against the cheek and the neck. Like the first one's quite bulky and looks like a boxer's thing, and the second one looks a bit more like a superhero kind of helmet.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm looking at it now.
Yeah.
I see.
It's a different sort of. It gives him a different profile.
It's much more campy, which I guess is appropriate for the
rest of the season.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's. I don't know. I don't love it, but it makes sense with what this season is going to be about. Yeah, it's a little weird look, but I mean, we'll leave it alone. Something I quite also like about this moment is he's like, yeah, I gave you these gloves, you know, they're reinforced or whatever, because you know this guy, Matt's punching a bunch of guys constantly. Obviously, is the thing he would need some kind of reinforcement in those gloves, which is cool. We then get Finn, who's captured Frank, and he does this like little moment where he's like, do you want to nibble? And he's got these, what I assume are like pain pills or something like that. Like I assume it's like an opioid or something. And he's like, he keeps trying to run game on Frank. I was talking about that before about Matt trying to run game on Frank on the rooftop. Finn is trying to run game on Frank, and like Frank just isn't biting on any part of it. He's like, oh, you know, if you're bloody lucky, you know, you'll be in a coffin and all your legs and limbs will be attached or whatever. And Frank just doesn't react. He's like, yeah, fucking whatever.
Yeah.
This guy can't be intimidated. He can't be. He doesn't care about himself.
Yeah, it's because, you know, he's already suffered the worst thing he can. This is nothing. Torture, baby
Whatever.
time.
Anytime, bro. Any day. And then Finn fucking pulls out a drill and drills into Frank's foot, which is a lot to watch.
Yeah, it is quite an intense like torture scene, eh? They usually cut away. I mean, they do cut away, but not before you see this blood like spurting out of his foot.
It's crazy. It's crazy. And then of course he can't break him, so he brings in the dog.
Yeah.
Finn threatening to kill the dog is like, this is where you know that this guy is gonna die, because this shit is over the line. So everything I do to you, I'm gonna do to the dog, and I'm like, this guy has to go.
Well, I might have forgotten to mention it the last episode, or like the last episode of our show, but there's a cheat way of making your character sympathetic. They can do some horrible stuff, but if you make them like compassionate toward like animals and like dogs in particular, like that's how you know that they're living and they're ultimately going to be a good guy.
Yeah,
conversely,
conversely,
if you're cruel to animals, then man, you're fucked. Let me tell you,
you're so in trouble. You're not surviving this story.
No.
Yeah, it's pet the dog and save the cat are the two kind of maneuvers that you can do as shorthand. Yeah. I also quite like it's like not a very pleasant dog either. You know,
is it like a pit bull or something?
Something like that. Like it's like it's their dog that Frank has taken from like, you know, some execution that he's done. Presumably the Irish that he killed at the start. And he's just like taking care of it, and like this is his dog now.
Yeah.
And it's what gets him caught as well. His compassion for this thing is what allows the Irish mobsters to track him down to his apartment, which is where he springs that trap to lure them to the Ferris wheel. And then he has. So there's a little sequence before he goes to the Ferris wheel in the park, in Central Park where he's in a van and he's like bandaging his arm. It's unclear what he's doing. Like it's really
Well,
it's
he's putting the razor blade in his arm.
well, I know
he
that
pulls out
now,
later.
but
Yeah.
it's unclear like
Oh,
in that
okay,
moment what
right.
he's doing. Like you're supposed to be like, what the fuck is what happened? Or it's just like it's just like another moment of Frank being injured and patching himself up. And yeah, this is insane to me. So he's hidden the razor blade in his skin in order to escape. This guy is the most metal fucking character of all time. This is insane to me. Like so tough. And yeah, he pulls it out. He pulls it out, and he uses it to cut the duct tape. And manages to escape as Matt arrives. And he, like you said, he pretty easily and quickly removes Finn's face from his body with a shotgun.
He takes his face off.
This man, very dead. This man here, extremely dead.
It shows you that as well. Like, it doesn't cut away like most shows would. It cuts away as the bang happens, but no, the bang happens. You see his face melt away, and then it cuts. It's so metal.
It's so metal. And I think it's I as it happened, I went good. And that's the moment they get you. That's the moment they recruit you to Frank's perspective for the rest of this episode. Is that moment you're like, yeah, Finn did have to die.
He's such a scumbag too. When Frank asks, like, who was there that day? Who killed my family? And he says, "Who cares?" And
oh my god, yo,
just a scumbag.
It's the way he says it too.
Yeah, he delivers that line very well.
Oh yeah, and then that's he might have lived. He might have lived.
I doubt it, but
there was
maybe.
Any possibility of him living disappeared the second he said that.
Yeah,
and Frank doesn't let him finish. He just pulls the trigger.
Mm-hmm.
It's great.
It robs that Finn of like any importance he has as well. When he's just dispatched like everyone else, and it just moves on from him. You know, it's great. Like he's not valorized at all. He's just another piece of dead meat.
Yeah, he's just another body to Frank.
Yeah,
there's a great moment too where it's as he's escaping and he picks up a shotgun and without looking he just turns it to the side and kills a guy.
Yeah,
because he knew the guy had been standing there. Like stuff like that is like so cool and superhero movie action movie but it works here with Frank because his body language. We haven't really said this, but the way that Frank carries himself is like a brick shithouse. This guy is physically indestructible the way he carries himself.
And somehow he looks more badass with a limp.
It's I don't understand. It's the more injured he gets, the tougher he seems.
Yeah, it's some crazy like performance. Yeah,
absolutely spectacular stuff here. Frank goes to start killing people, and Matt's like, no guns. And Frank says something like, what does he say? Because he goes to punch the guy, and he says something to Matt. It's like some
when Matt knocks the gun out of his hand, he says no killing, and he says altar boy.
Yeah, altar boy. Yeah,
yeah,
which is very funny and 100% accurate.
Yes,
like at this point, Frank definitely has Matt's number, which is very good to me. They, okay. Do you want to talk about the graveyard scene, or do you have anything else before that? What's the Karen stuff? I haven't written that down. What's Karen doing?
There's a scene where she's doing some like, she goes to a guy she's working as a janitor, and he used to work at a hospital, and he's the one who has the evidence of Frank Castle, being in the coma and then waking up. But presumably the reason, and he was like really scared of Karen when she first walked in because he thought she was one of the suits. And it kind of reminded me a bit of Jessica Jones, like these portraits of people who have been severely fucked around by powerful people. Because he was, I don't know, he might have been a nurse or a doctor, and now he's a janitor. And then that's just it. That's just the end of that guy's story. And it's there's a lot of that kind of stuff in Jessica Jones, which was interesting.
the defenders the defenders imaginary in being so as like a little universe or sub universe is so intensely focused on the ground level stuff that it inadvertently is like quite a leftist piece of media, like
Yeah.
taken whole.
Yeah.
Because it's like, man, the system really does just fuck people over and not care about them.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, these big levers of power just dump these people out and give them no choice but to struggle by or take up a life of crime, right? Like there's a way in which you can understand why these characters end up in these positions. There's like it calls to mind that great scene in Batman Begins where Bruce Wayne goes to the club to confront what's the guy's name? It's not
Maroni?
Yeah, Maroni. He goes to confront Maroni, and Maroni's like, "Take a look around. Like, everyone's on my payroll. If not for
Yeah.
me, these people wouldn't be able to afford to eat. I'm running a fucking business here. You know, this city failed these people. I don't fail these people. You know, there is a social safety net in places like this, and that social safety net is crime because the government and the governing powers and the people in power do not produce those social safety nets for the people within them. And so they have little choice but to turn to means outside of the system and outside of the law. And I think you get these little portraits, like you said, of people. I mean, Jessica Jones is very interested in this as far as like the client she takes on. And that's why she's so loath to always be in these cases about like, ugh, it's another cheating spouse type thing. You know, she wants to be taking those cases where it's, you know, it's people who need help. And we get that in the start of the season with Matt and Foggy and the type of clientele they're taking on. These are people with no other recourse. They can't even afford to pay for a lawyer. You know, they get paid in food, right? There's an interest this show has, and I think like the Defenders has a little asterisk, except Iron Fist. There's something that the Defenders is interested in about the ways in which like everyday people get consumed by New York City and by these big power structures that exist within it.
The one that always stuck with me from Jessica Jones was the guy who gave both of his kidneys to Kilgrave, and he's like just in like this, you know, there's a machine keeping him alive, and it's just like the most like dark portrait of suffering that I think the Marvel universe has ever shown. I love that show. It's so dark. That first season is so dark.
It's so dark. And the way in which like Kilgrave seems to be like in this position where like implicitly like this is torturous for him as well. Like there's something like he is a deeply tragic figure. Obviously he's a fucking monster, but there is a way in which his life is robbed of him the moment these powers come into effect. He is no longer able to have relationships. Nothing he does is because of his merits. It's all because of this thing that happened to him.
He once told a man to go screw himself. What do you think happened?
It's so dark.
I love that line.
It's such a dark show. Yeah. The more you think about it, the more you just want to fucking crawl out of your skin. Yeah, I mean, Karen's little B plot here is cool. She does have that interaction, and he says, "Oh, you know, I knew I shouldn't have," but he's, you know, he did this. He says we unplugged him, right? He's on life support, and like a minute later, he just wakes up.
Yeah, because he didn't want to die,
which
is like another like such a badass. This guy's so badass he can't even die.
I've written down here. I think the idea he refused to die is such a cool superhero inflection. It's such an inflection. Yeah, Frank is such a force of will. He cannot be killed. It's fucking sick. This guy's awesome. He's the coolest OC ever. This is like the NPC in your D&D campaign. That's like the coolest guy on the planet. He has all the best armor and all the coolest moves. And everyone loves him. They're like, we just want this guy to be in it more. He's great. And then she goes to his house, right? That's the other thing Karen does this episode.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what our takeaway from that is. Obviously, she sort of sees the family, starts to put together that he lost that family. But I can't recall, is there a specific takeaway or object she finds or something like that? Like, is there something that comes of that?
That's what I'm trying to think of. I don't know. She looks at all the pictures, and then from what I remember, it cuts to him sitting at the carousel I think it's just sort of like an emotional beat. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, and that's kind of like Karen's little side plot. Who knows what the fuck Foggy is doing this episode? He's not in it till the very end.
Yeah, he's around.
He's on the bench. He's probably running the law firm that they own.
True. He's probably working. Yeah.
Okay. Well, should we talk about the graveyard then?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, man. Okay, so they end up in the graveyard. That's probably the graveyard where Ben is buried. It seems like there's only one in Hell's Kitchen. It's hard to say. Doesn't really matter. I choose to believe it's the same one.
Yeah.
And Frank says they basically stop, and Frank says, "I think I might cash out. You'd have made a hell of a Marine, Red." And then Matt sits down, and they start having a conversation, and Frank explains. He basically decides to tell Matt like why he did this, like why he's doing all of this. This is why in the summary I kind of compared it to a confession. He's going to confessional with Matt. It's no small coincidence they're in a fucking graveyard, guys. They're doing something here. The guy who kills people is performing confession in a graveyard because he's in good company.
I don't think there's any connection there, mate.
Okay,
I think you're seeing shit.
you bloody hipsters, you're always overthinking stuff. Okay, you fucking fucking go work, go broke. Not everything has meaning, mate. Maybe it's just TV. Maybe he just likes killing people. There's something happening here. You have what I quite like about this scene. This is why I wanted to bring up Gene Wolfe at the start and kind of talk about the ways in which there is sometimes no single clear primary priority of a scene in a story, and to me that's a really interesting thing. This scene, there is no single priority for this scene. It is not the priority of Frank performing confession to Matt. Could be motivated by needing to be understood by Matt. It could be that he needs to perform confession. He needs to say it out loud, literally perform confession, and then his penance will be going to prison. You know, in Catholicism and Christianity, whatever, you say Hail Marys, you do this, that, or the fifth thing. For him, that's obviously going to be facing the consequences of what he's done legally. You don't know if it's him saying this to Matt in order to get Matt to understand and be recruited and empathetic to the kind of man that he's become. You don't know if this is happening because Matt needs to know what he must do to avoid becoming this man. What must he react to differently? How must he react and perceive the world differently to this man to avoid becoming him? We don't know if that's the primary priority. There is a lot of things that you could read this scene as being about, and no single one of them takes priority in the text over the other because of the way in which the scene, like we were saying before on the rooftop, Frank isn't giving a speech to Matt. Frank is explaining himself, and Matt is asking questions when he feels it's appropriate. Which is, to my mind, why it feels like confession. This feels like a conversation between Matt and Father Lantom, but in this case, it's two equals who are very, very similar in the positions that they found themselves in.
Well, yeah, I love that. I wrote down, I was thinking, like, what actually compels a writer to include this scene into a show like this? To write about, like, the imperfections of grief and regret. Because he talks, I've noticed that, like, writers have this tendency to romanticize grief. Like, I lost my wife and we had this beautiful, perfect relationship, and I'll never get that back. Whereas in this scene, I love how Frank goes, how he says he couldn't take his wife to bed and he couldn't play catch with his son, he couldn't tuck in his daughter. It's messy and it's awkward and it's real. And I think, what compels someone to add this into a scene? Well, it's just like sort of love for storytelling, like a wisdom about storytelling as well, because these are the moments that I love most in my stories. That these are moments that, like, stick with me are moments about like love and loss and the imperfections of life. So, you know, to your point, like what is the reason? What is the point of this scene? Well, I don't know. What's the point of storytelling, man? Like, what's the point of having emotions and like investing emotions into characters and stuff?
Yeah,
it's all of that.
And that's exactly what I wanted to get to. Is I think that there is a mode of media criticism where the simplest way I can think of describing it is where people have an impulse to try and like solve a text. It's something that I, obviously when I work with Rybold and Darth and we talk about Star Wars stuff, there is a big component of the Star Wars community that wants to solve the films and solve these stories. This meant Y. This meant X, definitively. And the kinds of ways in which we are interested in thinking about stories is, the things that we will talk about and the things that interest us now when we talk about this episode now. If we were recording this episode a year from now, they would be very different things we would be interested in and prioritize in the way that we're thinking and the things we're interested in pulling apart. It would be similarly framed, it would be similarly motivated, but we would be at different places in our lives, and that would inform and motivate the different ways in which we would be pulling on different threads. And so to your point, like, you know, when people are asking those questions of like, why does a writer include this? It's like, well, because this is life. This is the ability to try and capture some aspect of like what it means to be human. Frank, I should explain. So Frank tells a story, and he basically he starts off by saying, you know, when I went overseas, I never had a problem with killing people. And watching my friends die, I didn't feel anything. I was sleepwalking. It didn't affect me. He says I was never scared. I was never anxious about anything. And he says, and you know, it was on the plane back home. That was when I was scared. That's when I was first. That's the first time I've been anxious. First time I've been scared, because I was waiting for God to pull the rug out from under me, waiting for it to all be over. And he goes on and he
says that's his kind of funny, which I thought was like really beautiful line.
Point, just such a good. Oh, it's so brilliant. So what? Yeah. Just all the morsels in this, absolutely brilliant. And he goes on to explain. You know, he comes home and he the first thing he does, he's like, it's so weird driving past fast food and buses and all this stuff that we're out there, you know, trying to protect. It's all weird. And you know, he goes to his daughter's school, and he talks about, like, you know, he's standing in the doorway, and walks over to her. She doesn't know Daddy's home, and he walks over and he hugs her, and he's bawling, and the teacher's crying, and all the kids are wailing, and like everyone's crying, and he's like, not my little girl. She's holding me up. She's holding me up. She's not crying. She's strong. And he says, how does something that beautiful come from me? And he's crying, and Matt's crying, and I'm crying, and it's like, it is just like the way that Bernthal delivers that is, if you don't cry in this scene, I don't know what you're fucking talking about.
It's hard crazy to communicate the weight of this scene when you're just sort of, you know, explaining it like this. You're explaining it very good, but his performance is just incredible. Like, you know, as he's talking about how he's crying, mate, I'm on the couch crying. Like, it is crazy emotional and poignant, and it's everything I look for in my stories. Yeah,
and it's earned as well. You can't just put this in an episode. You have to get there. That's different for every story. Getting there is different for every story. You will find that there are different things in each story that you're putting together and writing and trying to tell that will help you get to these places. But you have to be willing and open and vulnerable for that to be a possibility. You have to be prepared. I also can't express the gravity of writing something like this in the moment. Last November, when I was finishing the kind of big first draft for book 4, there's a character death at the end of that book that I was writing, and the gravity of writing that, and I've never had to do this because, like, that's a long running series for me. 10 years of my life, you know, by the time that book will come out in a few years from now, when we've gone through that drafting process, and it writing that character death, I'm crying as the characters are crying, and like you're in that moment, you're occupying that moment. And so to imagine being on set filming this and working with these actors in this moment after writing this scene. This is one of those, like, these moments happen throughout your career as a storyteller, but each and every single one of them is, you know, once in a lifetime opportunity to put something like this into a story, and to have it land in the way, not that you intended, but that it was always going to and inevitably would. And it like you said, I'm trying to convey the gravity of this is what I'm trying to do here. I will play the scene in full, because I think it's a really important and informative part of what the rest of the season is thinking about, when it comes to Frank and his role in this story. So yeah, when he says that line about, you know, something beautiful came from me, that was when I started crying. The bit that like gave me goosebumps and like really just put me. This is when I went, oh, this is something special. Is where he says, and it's Bernthal's delivery. He says, "Have you ever been tired, Red? I was so tired I couldn't even drink a beer."
You ever been tired, Red? Yeah. So you know. It's just I couldn't do nothing, you know? All the things. Couldn't take my wife to bed. Ball with the boys, shit. I was too tired, I couldn't even drink a goddamn beer, you know?
And it's like the specificity of the way that he's approaching this and his delivery of it. Like it's not a, he's not saying, "Oh, have you ever been tired?" or whatever. He's like talking about, like, have you ever been tired in your soul? Like in your entire soul. And he's sitting here and he's saying, "I'm cashing out. I'm done. I'm done. It's over. I'm letting go. I don't have to be tired anymore. It's time to rest." In this moment, he's coming to that. He's coming to that realization. He's explaining this to Matt. He's performing this confession because he knows, don't have to be tired anymore. I can rest. Now I get to rest. And it's the way it feels like it feels like for him this existential relief, like this relief of the soul. This isn't the kind of relief that any of us can feel in our regular lives. This isn't the same thing as the relief of like leaving a job you don't like, or finally breaking up with someone where you knew that was like a relationship that had to end. This isn't that kind of relief. This is like life-changing relief and rest. And it hits, it works. Like everything about this works.
Yeah, it's like, you know, probably one of the most profound moments of someone's life, kind of relief.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I don't know, it's kind of like a religious experience almost, in a sense, in terms of the magnitude of its significance. Yeah.
It's, I mean, just, yeah, it's really something special. It gives me goosebumps every time. Like, and I cry every time, and like even describing it before gave me goosebumps. It really is something special. And this show is capable of that, and very frequently does that, and is able to, because it earns it. And like you said, it isn't approaching this with, like, it's not trying to prove anything. It's not going out of its way to be like, we put this in the story because XYZ. Like, the story had to have this in it, and so it is here. Is sort of the way that it feels. It feels so emergent and natural, and that's Bernthal's performance. Of course, it's Charlie Cox's performance. It's the writing. It's the willingness to sit with it too. They occupy this space together, and they feel this thing together, and they are two people that can understand each other in this moment. And it's a beautiful, profound scene.
Yeah, and it's creatively bold and ambitious, and it's uncommon is, you know, the I don't know, kind of unfortunate thing, I suppose. it's the kind of thing that you feel like you wouldn't see from Disney. You know, maybe this new Disney Daredevil. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't
yeah.
feel like it's within the realm of possibility for that.
Yeah.
The Punisher in that would be a big, strong, tough guy who doesn't really have feelings,
Mm-hmm.
and crosses the line, and that's the extent of that character. I mean, you look at it, you look at John Bernthal, and you go, "That's a guy. That's a dude. That's a dude's dude. That's a big gun guy." And the fact that this show takes that character, takes that possibility, and takes us to this space with it, like, yeah, that is just like, that is so bold and interesting and creative. And we talked about subversion a little bit in season 1. It is subversive in the sense that, like, genre speculative fiction genre stories like this at this time were not doing things like this. Tony Stark was being a bit emo sometimes, but these shows weren't doing. When Tony Stark has PTSD in Iron Man 3, it's like it's nowhere close to this kind of it doesn't have anywhere close to this kind of gravity and profundity when it gets explored. It is the Hollywood version of this kind of thing. And that's part of why this feels so unique.
Yeah, I mean it can't slow its rhythm down to as slow as this Daredevil scene takes it. Yeah, which yeah, it's Hollywood. A lot of writing these days feel compelled to have a, you know, somewhat sort of like fast-paced rhythm, and you can't have these quiet, slow moments because it will be perceived as, you know, boring to a lot of people, I assume, which doesn't make the money, and therefore, you know, the higher ups will tell you, like, no, you can't take that out. What are you fucking doing? Like, it's not what we hired you for.
Make it more palatable. Needs to be more approachable. Yeah. I mean, that's obviously like the thing with Andor as well, right? Is like people like, Andor's boring and slow, and I'm like, you're out of your fucking mind. You're out of your mind thinking that.
You know, you can't even understand it. You know, how does something like that? How does something that beautiful? How does that come from me? You know? She looks up and she sees me. I see her. My God, that's real. That's real, Red. Boom. In an instant, she's across that classroom floor. She's in my arms. She's squeezing me so tight, I swear I was gonna bust a rib, you know? I just stay there like that. We're holding each other. Teacher, she's filming the whole thing on her phone, you know? She's gonna put it on YouTube, some shit. She can't hold the thing steady because, you know, she's bawling so hard, and kids are all wailing, you know? They're screaming at me shit. I'm the worst of all. I'm a rubber-faced clown, you know? Crying so hard. Not my baby. Not my girl. You know, I see my girl. She's not crying. She's holding me up. My girl, she's keeping me on my feet. She says, I knew it, Daddy. I knew it.
There is one other thing that I want to talk about in relation to, like, Batman and the resolution of this episode, which we haven't really touched on. We haven't really thought about this yet because it hasn't come up in the story, but...
Are you going to talk about the white lie stuff?
Yeah, so...
Yeah.
Do you want to set it up, Pat, like what happens here and then what we're referring to?
So, after their speech, or after, you know, their conversation, the cops arrive. It's Brett Mahoney and another police officer. And Brett is arresting Daredevil. And as he's arresting him, Daredevil says, look, you need to take credit for finding Punisher for this whole arrest. because people need to know that the law system works. And well, actually, there's a scene earlier in the episode where Daredevil meets Mahoney as he's investigating like another crime scene, and then Mahoney tells him, "You're the reason why there's people like Punisher." You know, it's the theme that is a recurring theme throughout these last few episodes of like, you are inspiring people like the Punisher to take the law into their own hands, and therefore, and it undermines the justice system as a whole, and it creates a lot of chaos because people don't believe in the security that the system provides, and therefore, and then it comes back around, and I don't know, it seems like Matt's thought about this, and he's saying to Brett now, look, yeah, you need to take credit for this arrest so that people know the system works. The thing is, this is kind of, and there's some like Batman music playing in the background as he's saying this as well. It's like some Hans Zimmer, like Nolan music. It's crazy.
It is the scene from the end of The Dark Knight.
Yeah. The Dark Knight Rises is, oh wait, no, is it? Wait, is it the?
So the way that The Dark Knight ends is Two-Face tries to kill Batman and Commissioner Gordon and Commissioner Gordon's kid. And the lie that Jim Gordon and Batman agree on is Batman says, I could do those things. So, you know, Two-Face has gone around and done these killings and these murders. But the district attorney can't have done those things. He was the White Knight. He was the shining light. And so Batman says, I did those things. And that's the lie that Jim Gordon agrees to. And that is the lie on which Gotham is made safe by the time The Dark Knight Rises occurs.
Yes.
And that is the lie on which this new system of policing is constructed upon.
That's right. Yeah.
And so what's interesting to me here, and like, you know, the thing that is asking, the question that is asking is, Jim Gordon is racked by guilt about this decision, to the point where he's written a speech that reveals what happened, because in his mind, he has villainized his partner, like Batman, like this friend he has, this savior. He has villainized him in service of the system, which is corrupt and slow and decaying. What Jim has inadvertently done is instead of reforming the system, he's emboldened it to continue doing the things that were failing to make change. He has reproduced the flaws that led to the reason the Batman existed in the first place. And here we have the same decision, like you said, to the same kind of music in a similar kind of moment, where Matt is sort of saying, you know, to Mahoney, yo, we need to lie about what happened here because people need to trust the system can do it. But like, I don't think the system can do it. The system couldn't take down Fisk without Daredevil. The Punisher wouldn't have turned himself in if it weren't for Daredevil. Like Matt is wrong. Matt is wrong about this. I think, but also it's the only choice available to them.
Yeah. There's something kind of you know, the unwashed masses need a lie to keep them to make them feel safe. There's something that leaves kind of a bad taste about that.
You don't think it's a surprise that Matt is the one that suggests this, right? Like all compelling religions are like based on a contradiction, right? And Matt's Catholicism and the contradiction that lies at the heart of Catholicism, like I don't think it's surprising that he's the one that proposes it. That he sees that in order for people to have faith in something, there has to be some paradox at the heart of it that enables people to believe despite, not because. People believe in Catholicism not because it makes sense, but despite the fact it doesn't. You know, and that to me is like, this is gesturing in that direction in some ways with this lie. Is gesturing at the fact that like people, some version of like people want to deceive themselves, and that's where law and order can come from. That's where society exists, is in the deceit of the willingness to deceive the self and believe a contradiction is in somehow inherent to these structures and ideas, and the effectiveness of law and order and faith and these things that Matt, because that's Matt's contradiction, is he knows that he is deliberately naive, deliberately hopeful, but that is what allows him to do the things he does, and allows him to help people.
I guess, like, ideally, Matt wants to provide people a starting point to become good moral citizens. Like, you know, for example, if Matt was just a lawyer, he's sticking his neck out for, you know, the people that otherwise can't afford lawyers, like, you know, looking out for the little guy. And that's possibly, you know, if there was someone like that that's possibly rooted in a belief that the system is good and just and works, and it'll inspire more people like that. And maybe that's where he's coming from.
Yeah.
Is that, like, ultimately, you know, it'll inspire a lot of good. It's like kind of like Superman, you know.
And he also says, he says to Mahoney, like, you deserve a promotion anyway. Like, he wants this guy to be in higher positions of power because Mahoney is one of the good guys.
Yeah.
Mahoney is like Foggy. And Matt seems to realize that in the same way that, like, in the same way that Harvey Dent was able to be the face of Gotham and the savior of Gotham. He's the White Knight. In that same way, Matt seems to realize that, like, he cannot be that person. He is incapable. He is sort of occupying the role of a character like a Luthen or something like that. Like, these characters who will burn themselves in order to enable people, in order to enable the actual good guys to go out and do and make a difference. Because they know they are not that. They are not the good guys. They are the people who have to do the bad things that put the good guys in positions where they can make a difference.
When you were talking about that, that director talking to Stellan Skarsgård, was that the scene where he's talking to that guy in the elevator and he's on that, like, the...
Yeah, it's the big speech.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
He says, what if you sacrificed? And he's, you know, is everything.
Yeah.
Love, intimacy, happiness, companionship. You know, it's such a good. By the way, go watch Andor. I've said that already, but, like, god damn, that show's so good.
Yes, sir.
Look, yeah, I think this is really interesting. I think it's setting up some stuff that the following season will be thinking about a little bit more. With the positions, without spoiling it, with the positions that it puts Foggy and Mahoney in. I think that and Tower, I think that's kind of season 3 is really where that gets thought about a bit more in detail. But certainly this is wrapping up the Punisher part of this story, insofar as, like, the Punisher out in the city, and then the rest of the season will be about some other stuff that obviously gets flagged at the end with that little sting. I also really like. So Matt and okay, we gotta talk about this with fucking bizarrely paced ending. This is an hour-long episode. It's a long one, and the last 15 minutes is these slow resolutions playing out. So you get the Mahoney thing, and then you get the gang at the bar, and they're having a conversation, and whatever, and then they're gonna head home. And Matt and Karen, I like the way that they let this linger. Matt and Karen walk home together, and we get a lot of it. We get to see a lot of this sequence of them holding hands and walking home, and they're standing in the rain, and they kind of share their first kiss. And it seems to me like you said this. I don't know when. I think it was, like, maybe even, like, episode 0 or something like that. But, like, Matt is just, like, perpetually doomed to anything good he has to just get undone immediately. And this moment is really one of those moments here where he's done the noble lie. Punisher has agreed to stop. The Irish mob is dead. You know, Finn's gone. And there's this brief moment of peace where he finally is able to reach out, make this move on Karen, and then he says, "Do you want to, can I take you to dinner?" And she says yes. And so they have a date planned for tomorrow night. And he goes back upstairs, and clearly Matt is still thinking a little bit about, as you would be, as we are too, as the viewers. Matt is still dwelling on Frank and everything that just happened and the conversation they've had. And I thought it was a very small thing, but it's so tidy. The first thing he does is he grabs a beer from the fridge, which just made me think of like when Frank's like, "You ever been so tired you can't even drink a beer?" Grabs a beer from the fridge, and then he smiles and has this like look of relief. And it's the same sense of relief that Frank has when he performs that confession and says, "I'm cashing out." And Matt gets that relief for himself in that moment where he seems to realize for himself, the way I read this anyway, is that he is realizing for himself that he has been so tired for so long and it's time to take a breath out and rest.
Yeah.
And in that moment, we then get what happens, which we'll talk about in a sec, but yeah.
Well, at the bar and like everything building up to that scene, there's these moments of, Karen saying like, it's at moments like these that make you think about like, how short life is and whatnot. There's all this like really like sentimental kind of like pensive contemplation going on by the characters. And it's actually really kind of poetic and beautiful how little is said. And I like when they're standing outside, it's just Foggy and Matt. Foggy says, "Careful, Matt, if you keep going, you might end up happy." And it's kind of like, it's one line and there's just like a lot of meaning packed into that line, but like in a very indirect way. And their whole walk home, there's not much dialogue said at all. Like it's strangely subtle and just man, I don't know. There's it's like some actual like movie kind of stuff, like but yeah, anyway, and then it all culminates in that really quiet moment of Matt having that beer. Yeah, I think it's all like it's very beautiful, honestly.
Yeah, and I think it's like a sense of like serenity to it. There's a sense that like that's why like in the summary, like it's like it feels like Hell's Kitchen is at peace for a moment. It feels like it feels like everything is over for a moment, and like these people are just allowed to they finally have the space, and no one has to say it. I think you're right. I think in a different show, one of these characters says, "Oh, I love you," and this, that, and the fifth thing, and now that the punish is done, let's talk about us or whatever. Like, there's a different version of this that is schlocky or different, and this you're absolutely right. I agree with you. This is understated and it lets itself. You know what it is? I think the show in general trusts the story it's telling. It knows that it's enough. It knows that it's enough, and you'll get there yourself. You'll be along for the journey. It trusts its own work that it's doing.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just frankly like a beautiful moment. You're right. It's a beautiful moment, and that the smile that Charlie Cox manages it's like it's just absolutely fantastic. Like, it's brilliant acting. And I like the ways in which, because he's in this moment of relief and he's finally taken a breath out. It's like, the Punisher was talking about. He's ready to rest. It's because of that he doesn't
he
notice
lets his guard down. Yeah.
Elektra sitting in his living room. What did she say? Hello, Matthew, or something? Did she speak?
Hello, Matthew.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I fell out of my chair. I was like, what the fuck is she doing? I'd forgotten that's how this happens. It really got me, Pat. I was like, what the fuck?
Just go straight into the next plot.
Oh, I mean, for me, this is obviously, these 4 episodes are kind of setting the status quo for what's to come. And it's like they work through all these really difficult things for the world to then just conspire for none of it to last. Matt's in a good place with Foggy, Karen and Matt are all lovey-dovey, and then it's like, oh no, fuck you. No good things for you guys. Life is too complicated for that.
Yeah. Matt's a complicated dude. He's got things going on.
It's like Claire said, he's a complicated dude, and I just don't need that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Claire saw it coming. She got out of dodge. Look, I mean, I don't really have anything else to say. I think we've really covered like the big maneuvers here. Except to say, like, I mean, we've said this a dozen times already on this recording, but like, these 2 episodes are just insane, like crazy,
Godlike.
Yeah, if you want to learn how to tell a good story, because this is a whole story, by the way, this is like a novella, right here. If you're looking for something to study of like what can stories do and how can they work and how can they move, these 4 episodes are absolutely perfect material for that.
Yeah, imagine an edit where someone like just takes these 4 episodes, like cuts right before Elektra, like imagine Matt smiles and then it cuts to black and then like the credits, and like imagine like that's the end of this, like the show. Like, bro, that'd be some crazy that'd be some crazy stuff.
If you put these 4 episodes together, they're a movie, right? Like that's the truth of it.
Yeah.
And that's like impressive to me. Like the ability to kind of have this be so precise and so neat, and like in speculative fiction, not every theme and idea and maneuver has to relate to each other. You can just have things that are like in there for the sake of being in there. But I like the ways in which like Daredevil is very tidy about this stuff.
Yeah.
You know, like it's really simple stuff. Like the fact that Frank has that specific line about like, so tired you can't even drink a beer, and then the first thing Matt does is drink a beer. Like it's so tidy. The show is so tidy. And it's the same reason why Jessica Jones is so good as well. And a lot of Luke Cage and those stories and what they're thinking about is, like we said before, it's putting these themes in there, being willing to have characters talk about them, and then making the story about those things directly.
And the show is yet to pull like another amazing trick out of its hat of connecting, not like in a plot sense, but thematically connecting the next upcoming Punisher arc and the arc about the Hand, and about Elektra. It does some like real storytelling voodoo to like as you said, like make these things like really tidy. And I'm so like, since my sort of like narrative literacy has improved over the years, like the last time I watched this I was just so impressed, and I can't wait to hear you talk about it as well. I think you will be equally as impressed.
I don't remember, so
it's honestly like, yeah, they're phenomenal writers, these guys.
They're doing it. Look, next time we're talking about episodes 18, 19, and 20. So it's a 3-episode bill. So it's season 2, episode 5, season 2, episode 6, and season 2, episode 7. Which is, like you said, it's going to be our Elektra stuff, and it's going to be our Frank stuff, which is going to be really cool in the lead up to the season finale. So make sure you watch those if you're watching along. Pat, where can people find you on the internet? Where can they get more of your stuff?
I run a podcast with my friend Mitchie called A Method to the Madness. You can find us on Spotify, iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, and Stitcher. I said that in a weird order, but they got all out there. We have a website, amttm.com. You can find all of our socials from there.
Love it. Of course, everything we do at ZeroIndent, you can find at ZeroIndent.com or at youtube.com/ZeroIndent. My new book is out. You can see the print behind me, the very large print, Give Up After 3. It's my Sherlock book. Go check it out. It's very interesting. The hardbacks have just been, the test prints for the hardbacks have just been done, and they look incredible. You can find that at underink.press. That's underink.press, which is our independent publication, where you can find everything that ZeroIndent publishes. And you can also grab yourself a sweet Daredevil in the Details tee. Beautifully embroidered, fantastic art. You're going to love it. And the best thing is, no one in your life is going to know what the fuck it's about. So they don't have to know you're a nerd. It just looks like,
right.
It just looks like cool merch.
You're like, oh yeah, you like Daredevil? Cool.
Yeah. They're like, what's a Daredevil? And you go, I don't know, man. I just bought this shirt. I got no idea. You could be a secret.
Is it a little rodent?
Yeah, it could be.
Is it like a Wolverine?
Is it like a Wolverine? Is that like a Tasmanian devil? Like, what's going on? Yeah, go grab them. It really does help support the show. You can also back us on Patreon. But to be honest, the merch is probably at the moment the best way to support us. And you get something from it, which we love to see. Like I said, underink.press. All the links for all of that stuff will be in the show notes. And wherever you find this, please consider giving us a rating, a review, or an engagement on your platform of choice. We appreciate the heck out of it. We'll be back next time, episode 9, where we'll be talking about those 3 episodes, which is super exciting. I don't remember any of this. I'm so keen to get into it. That's it, Pat. That's all she wrote. Any parting words? Any final words of wisdom?
Don't do a Punisher and kill a bunch of people.
Yeah, it's good advice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Regardless of the context, don't do a Punisher. That's our recommendation.
Yes. Official ZeroIndent recommendation.
Official. That's backed by the company. Don't be doing a Punisher, please and thank you.
Yes.
All right, I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.
Alrighty. See you later.